Hi, my name is Katie Stanton. Today, I'm going to walk you through the landmark Supreme Court case Gitlow v. New York. Gitlow v. New York aided in defining specifics for protection of free speech under the First Amendment. This decision protected First Amendment rights at the state level by incorporating First Amendment freedoms, such as the freedom of speech, under the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. Benjamin Gitlow was a member of the Communist Party and published The Revolutionary Age, a radical newspaper publication. The newspaper included the publication The Left-Wing Manifesto, modeled after Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. This publication advocated for the violent overthrow of the U.S. government. Gitlow was arrested in November 1919 for his connection to the Revolutionary Age. His encouragement for this violent overthrow of the government violated the New York Criminal Anarchy Law of 1902. Under this law, it is a crime to advocate for the violent overthrow of the government. The case first appeared in the New York District Court in January 1920. Gitlow argued that the Left-Wing Manifesto was an expression of historical analysis rather than an act of practical advocacy. This argument was not found to be valid, and Gitlow was convicted on February 11, 1920. Gitlow was granted an appeal motion on December 13, 1922. The decision was held by the Appellate Division of the Supreme Court, which, unlike many states, is a trial court in New York. The decision was later upheld by the Court of Appeals, the highest court in the state of New York. Writ of error to the Supreme Court of the United States was granted in November 1922. The case began arguments on April 12, 1923, and the Supreme Court upheld his conviction in a 7-2 ruling. The debate within this case came down to the statute by which Gitlow was convicted. The statute conflicted the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. This confliction did not pose any change to Gitlow's conviction, but it did cause the court to further review rulings of previous Supreme Court cases such as Barron v. Baltimore. In this case, the Bill of Rights applied solely to the federal government, and states were able to enforce statutes that restricted these rights. Justice Sanford delivered the opinion of the court and held that the 14th Amendment prohibits states from infringing free speech, but the defendant was properly convicted under New York's criminal anarchy law due to the fact that he was distributing paper that advocated for the violent overthrow of the government. This ruling partially reversed the precedent held in Barron v. Baltimore. This is done through the incorporation doctrine. Relying on the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, this doctrine lays out specific rights in the Bill of Rights that are incorporated into the liberties covered in the Due Process Clause. The dissenting opinion of the court was given by Justice Holmes, followed by Justice Brandeis. The opinion stated that the judgment should be reversed. The general principle of free speech, it seems to me, must be taken to be included in the 14th Amendment, in view of the scope that has been given to the word liberty, as they're used, although perhaps it may be accepted with a somewhat larger latitude of interpretation than is allowed by Congress by the sweeping language that governs or ought to govern the laws of the United States, he specifies. This landmark decision shows that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution has certain limitations on federal government authority set forth in the First Amendment, specifically the provisions protecting freedom of speech and freedom of press to the government of individual states. This decision was significant because it set a new precedent for free speech on a state-by-state basis and broadened our free speech rights for our country.
Created using Powtoon.